In my previous episode, the first episode, the intro, I actually realized I was looking at the analytics and I've actually observed that 52% of people who actually watched the video or the episode had not subscribed to the platform or to the podcast, and 48% actually they've engaged in either liking, sharing comments and words of encouragement, and I'm so thankful for that 48%. To the 52%, I just want to urge you to support this journey. I'm starting out, as you guys can see, but for me to really keep going, I just want to keep asking that you don't just watch, but you grow this community so that I can also have, the edge and encouragement to keep doing this. So please, as you watch, do the right thing. Keep subscribing. Buying a home for the very first time can be daunting, especially if you haven't done research in terms of what you're getting yourself into. And property is an investment. It's a long-term investment where you commit a lot of money into it. So I find that first-time buyers most of the time, they tend to make very common mistakes, which had they done the research or asked the relevant questions, they wouldn't have made such mistakes. I myself, when I bought property for the first time, I think was lucky. I was lucky in the sense that I worked for banking, number one. Number two, I have finance background. And I've always thought what would happen to somebody who does not have access to this kind of knowledge that I have. And in today's episode, we're going to be diving into that. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Balcony Dialogue. I go by the name of Katlego Kgosi, or just short Katlego Kgosi. For this edition, I feel like a lot of estate agents may not like some of the things that I'm going to highlight. Purely for the fact that it's common assumption that estate agents actually work for the seller. So when you buy property, you have the buyer side, which is you, the first time buyer, and then the seller side is the person who was occupying the property. And then the estate agent would have originally been appointed by the seller to say, I have this house with 1 million rents and I need to sell it. Go find me somebody who can buy it. And what do you do as an estate agent? An estate agent is essentially appointed by the seller to go source potential buyers. So the property worth 1 million, and in that, an estate agent will get a percentage of the transaction value. So if the math say, if the price is maxed, the estate agent would get a better commission based on the value of the property, right? That's where the notion that they are for the seller, it makes sense. So let's say the range of the property is between 900K and 1.1. What is most likely to happen is that the seller wants to maximize the investment, that I need to sell high, but at the same time, the estate agent is looking at an opportunity to max also his or her commission because it's percentage based. So if he's going to max it by selling at 1.1 and the commission rate is 5%, it will be high based on how high they can go. So you come as a first time buyer, you you go to a bank, you say, I like this property, and you start to do the homework in terms of how much can you qualify for. And before we dive into that, I think the most important thing is for me to highlight, the key thing is you don't decide overnight that you're going to buy property. You don't decide overnight because it's a long-term investment. You're tied to the longest period ever of any other investment you think of, most likely in your lifetime, right? So that's why I'm saying you don't decide overnight that you're going to commit to that. So you'd have had time to plan ahead. And I always say I like first-time buyers who had rented before, because then you would have done a lot of things. Like if you've rented before, by the time of you renting a property in a particular area, you're getting exposed to a certain amount of money coming out of your coming out of your bank account every month, right? And you committing to paying rental costs is also important. If you default, then that also has a bearing on either your credit score or even the bank. When you apply, they can see that, but you seem not to be consistent in terms of your rental payments. That's number one. Number two, if you rent before, you have chances of accumulating stuff like furniture, so that when you move into your first property, you don't have to invest in that. And over and above that, again, you have to buy stuff to move in. Unless if you are a rich kid and have money to do all these sorts of things at a go. And what does it look like after you've gotten the property, or after you've signed a property? I mean, an OTP, which is an offer to purchase with the bank, right? You are facing the 1 million that I've been talking about, which the bank is going to give you, and then your repayments will be installments on monthly basis. But even before that, you are facing transfer costs that often you're not even aware of. It will hit you when you are just now, you are excited, you are getting into this thing, and the transfer and bond cost, this is what happens with them. The owner that was owning the property, when now they sell it, there has to be a change of ownership from the seller into your name, right? That involves lawyers getting involved in terms of doing that let's call it transfers admin, right? That is number one. You are also facing the cost of now bond registration with the bank now, the bank attorneys, to now register the bond into your name. You are also facing, there's a tax charge they call transfer duties, which it's also have to be added into that. So transfer duties, transfer cost, bond registration, they can get up to 70K if you're looking at a 1 million house that I'm talking about. And here's the catch. This amount of money, actually, you don't go to the bank and then ask for it. It's separate. You need to have it idle somewhere. If you don't have it idle somewhere, then everything just stops until you can raise that amount of money. And because now you are sitting in a situation where, let's say you don't have it, these amounts of money, so you don't have them with you, you now you find yourself having to max your credit cards. If you can't max your credit cards, you are faced with having to run around and going to banks, applying for personal loans to fund this, right? The bank can actually see because they haven't approved the entire bond, right? They can actually pick up that you now are doing things on the side, because when they were vetting and doing their credit score on you, you were not exposed to this kind of debt. So if you start now applying, that can also have like a negative impact, to a point where even what they were prepared to give you originally, they reduced that, because then it means you're now getting more debts to fund that. This is what happened with me. So because I had done a lot of homework in terms of fixing my credit score, giving me myself time frame to get my house in the order, my financial position. Part of me getting an offer at that time, I actually got more than, I think I got 105%, 105% of the total bond. So the bank was willing to give me the cost of the bond, and they were willing to give me slightly 5% more of the total value, and I could use that amount of money to help me to fund now the transfer and the bond registration. And in totality, I was left with about, I think, 12,000 that then I could top up into that to be able to afford the admin cost that I've mentioned. So imagine if I didn't qualify for 105%, then it means I was going to have to run around to get this 60 to 70k worth of additional monies to fund the transfer admin, right? So that is another key thing. So yeah, the 12k I had to raise it. So it was easy also, because then it means if I didn't have it, I would have to tap into a credit card, and it wouldn't be that substantial then, because it's not a big amount of money. So yeah, that is very important. And back into transfers and bond registration. If you are buying a property from a developer, I think you end up not having to pay um, the transfer, the ownership change, because you're buying from a developer, which is very good, because then it means you are saving up to, I think, 35k in total. You would be spending time in just registering, spending money in bond registration, and then that's where it'll end. But if you're buying from somebody who had owned before, then you are facing this. When you're buying a house also with over a million, you end up having to pay transfer duties, which are taxes that goes to SARS. But if it's below a million, it means of these admin and transfer costs, you pay less, because you're exempt of paying the transfer duties, which is something that we can discuss in detail in the next editions, when we have a property specialist who can, share much light in these kind of things. So the first most important thing that I would have done is to fix your credit score. It's going to determine how much money banks are going to give you for your property. And if it's really good, it means you're getting a high value, and your interest rates will be very low, because your risk profile saying that you're paying your debts in time. So take for example, there's two first time buyers, same qualification, same earning potential, same age. They do not necessarily have the same credit profile. It's purely based on your behavior in the past, about how are you paying. Are you paying your debts in time? The income that you get, are you consistent also with things like your short-term lending, your credit card, is it up to date? And the income, is it consistent as it comes in and out of your bank account? So then that determines the percentage that the banks would lend. And the other common mistakes that most of first-time buyers do would be they will just go to their banker and ask them for, hey, I want to invest in my first-time home, and then they start applying. The bank gives them the value that this is how much you qualify for, this is the interest rate, and this is the term of the loan. And they'll just take that as the B and the end of it all, that this is what I qualify for. So what I had done myself was to go to my current banker and say, I need to buy a house. They would give me a rate. And then I started shopping around. I shopped around because I wanted to get the most competitive rate I can get out there, and also really makes what I think I qualify for, right? So one bank would give you 900K at 11% interest rate over a term of 20. I've seen some recently, they can even push it up to, I think, 32 months or more than that. And remember, with a home loan, the longer it takes you to pay it off. So the longer the term, it means you're locked in and you're going to spend a lot of time paying interest, as opposed to having a very short term where the quicker your repayment, then the lesser you're going to contribute into interest, right? So those are the things that you need to look out for. I always say that you can look at up to 3 or 4 actually comparison from different banks, and look at the one that gives you the best rate, the best value that you need for that particular property that you've identified. Number 3, very important, the term of the loan. So you'd compare all of them, and after doing the comparison based on the one that looks most likely, actually, I would not already like outright commit to that. The second point that you can actually negotiate on is with the seller or with the agent representing the seller. They tell you that this house is worth 1.1 million. You've done your homework. You've checked around that, okay, I'm buying a 3-bedroom in this particular area. And what's the average price in that area where you're buying in, right? Why do you do that? You're avoiding to be buying just for the sake of the fact that the bank gave you this value, then you're going for it, right? And then you, upon your doing research, you find that actually I can reduce this value. I can negotiate with the agent to tell them that actually I don't qualify for 1.1 at the bank. I can get up to 1,050,000. And the other thing is also very important. It'll also depend on what information are we beginning on. People always say information is power. And so think about somebody who's selling a property because they're relocating, and somebody who's selling a property because they want to sell, they in the investment of buying and selling properties. Their point of negotiation is different, because this specific one that is relocating, or they just want to get rid of the property, they have less bargaining power. So if you ask the relevant question and keep your open mind, actually, you can get access to the information that can help you to, when you negotiate for now, the actual purchase price being reduced, because that is going to also help you when you are locked in your bond with the bank. I'll give you a practical example of what happened with me. So I meet this lady who's an agent. We start talking and engaging. And I think I was lucky because she was also new in the industry. So she wasn't really much aware of certain things. And as I was asking this question, she started to divulge that I bought from, I think, an older couple, I think in their 50s, Indian. It's husband and wife. And at the time, I'm not sure if they had kids. So they live in this property and they are actually also part of the body corporate. And I start asking these questions that what are the reasons that they're selling? Um, she tells me that no, it's because they found another property. And then she also divulged to me that unaware that they press for time because they've committed on their end with the bank that they need to move into this new property. And I was like, okay, this sounds interesting for me because then it means if they press for time, I'm not pressed for time, right? What I'm going to do is negotiate that. Remember, I've negotiated with the banks in terms of the interest rates. I gotten that out of the bag. And I was like, okay, here's a begging for me to actually now push down the price of this property because they are pressed. I'm not pressed for time. I can still look around, right? I like the property, yes, but I have an angle that I can also negotiate to bring obviously the value of the property down. I start to show interest in the property, but I'm very also slacking in terms of committing because now they're pushing. I come back to the estate agent and I tell her that no, I've done the sourcing of finance myself. Obviously, I say to her, actually, my bank is gonna give me lesser than what you guys are selling the property, the asset, right? And then she start to ask how much are they offering you? I give her a value. When I give this value, that asset I qualify for, it was actually lower by 50K. And she went back to the seller. They start talking. A day or two, they come back to me. When they come back to me, they pleading that is there no way that I can at least they give me not 50K discount and the seller is willing to go up to I think 30K. I think 32, 32, 35. For me, I think it worked because then that is when I said, okay, it's fine. Let me not try push it too hard because I also like the property. But I like the fact that they're willing to meet me halfway, right? So do you see what I alluded to earlier? I said they would put a price, makes it that the seller get value out of the property. But the estate agent also, they're looking at the higher the property, the higher their commission. So those are one of the things that you can look out for. And yeah, I benefited in two ways. Lower the interest rate and then you lower the actual value of the property. Here is the other most important thing, and I think it's a very gray area because also as a buyer, you buying based on your preferences, and I'm not the person who likes to impose the things that I like on other people. So I'm not gonna come into a podcast and say, don't do this, do that, do that. The best I can do is just to highlight certain things and say to you, look out for this and don't look out for that, right? Guys, location, it's so important. It's important to me. And I'll tell you why I'm saying it's important. It's important because buying a house, you're committing to a long term investment. You want an area that is going to they like to say in the finance space, an area that is booming. Booming in the sense that after you buy the property, what is happening around it, right? Because if you find a patch of land and then you commit to buying a unit, and then the next thing, squatter camps are mushrooming around where you bought the property, that most likely is going to affect the development surrounding that area. Um, that happens because now some people start to feel like, no, I can't live there. So by the time you want to sell, it's very difficult. Or even if you get a buyer, you're gonna have to find yourself having to compensate in the value of the properties around there, because then it means people are running away because of either their safety or they're not comfortable. So what do you do then if you me? You look out for a property in the area that is highly likely to have shopping centers accessible to that. It has to be accessible to all modes of transport, especially public transport. You're gonna need that, and I'll tell you why. Um, are there restaurants around? Um, how accessible is that to the industries, to the companies? Because then, if you decide tomorrow that you are moving out and then you're renting out the property, you want it to be able to attract potential tenants as quick as possible. So if it's accessible, if it's closer to all these amenities, it makes it so easy and attractive for either a buyer or a tenant who want to occupy that particular property. So that is very, 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 very important. Um, you don't want to bet in a horse that does not give you returns. Either way, it has to, because eventually, even if you leave the house for your kids, um, it has to be beneficial also to them because it's an asset. When they sell it, they must not necessarily sell it at loss by virtue of the fact that you didn't do your, I would say, your proper homework. The next thing that you want to do correctly without fail, often when you are excited that you're buying this house, it's so nice, it's in a nice estate or a complex, you like everything about it. um you have to do the right inspection. The seller has to give you the right to be comfortable that you committing to this investment and you are comfortable in all respects. So you have to go and inspect the property. Look for look for things like cracks into inside the property and even outside. Be comfortable that you are happy with that, especially if it's a complex that has been there for longer. It's not a new development, because then it means there would have been previous owners in that property, right? You look out for cracks. Is it clean, well painted? You can actually also demand that they don't just like wash the walls. You demand that it get painted. They can do that. You look at the windows. Are they intact? You look at the taps. You look at everything and make sure that it's above board. And I'm saying this because buying an asset comes with things they call you buying in, what's the word? I've done this in corporate law in my schooling days. Food stewards arrangement, where I'm saying I buy this as it is. As soon as you've concluded the transaction of buying this asset, if you identify defaults or defects in the asset, you can now run to the seller and say the property is leaking. most likely they won't even entertain that. You needed to have done the right inspections so that when you commit, you know that I'm comfortable with the most obvious things. That is very, very important. The other thing that I've seen someone do recently is she went as far as tapping into asking about the financials of the body, like the body corporate who are overseeing that particular estate or a complex. She asked for to have access to the latest minutes of that, which is something that I didn't do myself. But I was very interested in what the approach she was taking. That I want to know. I want to have a look at the last minutes of the body corporate meeting. Also look at the financial affairs of the body corporate. Are they investing in developing the estate, or people are paying levies and they are just falling into this rabbit hole where the money is not reinvested into fixing and maintaining the property to look the estate to look attractive and well taken care of. Actually, I'm reminded of the other thing. Earlier, I spoke about the costs. Now I'm talking about the levies. So, after you commit to buying this property, there's additional cost that you will pay again over and above that 70K I was talking about earlier for bond registration admin, which goes to the lawyers. Um, Now you have to pay the levies. You need to tap into knowing how much the levies are, because they mustn't be such huge that they overwhelm you or your ability to be able to do your monthly repayments into this bond, right? So there's levies which then goes into the body corporates fund. Body corporate consists of the people most of the time who are living in that estate or the complex. So they are appointed to oversee that the property is well taken care of, the security is maintained, it looks good and appealing, it's clean. So over and above your bond, you'll pay that, which goes into that fund. So that then takes care of that. Now there's another thing. It's the municipal rates. So over and above now the levies. There's municipal rates which involves now you paying, for example, I bought in Tshwane. So it will mean that the cost of municipalities to come every week to come and do collect garbage, then that amount of money and maintaining the roads around where you live then has to be paid to the municipality. That is also very important for you to consider, because it's a fixed cost over time that will pay for as long as you live in that area, right? So if you live in city of Joburg, you'll pay to COG. If it's Tshwane, then you'll pay to Tshwane as I do. So that amount normally ranges, I think, to up to 1,000. That is also dependent on the value of the property. So the larger the property or the state that you're buying in will determine how much of these municipal rates you're gonna end up paying. And if you don't pay these costs and the levies, what happens? Um, Either the estate, I mean the body corporate, or the municipality, they have legal recourse against you to come and demand this sort of money. And you don't want to find yourself in not paying them, and you're now exposed to you being sent summons, legal fees to pay all these things. So it's also very key to do consider that in you doing the financial position homework. Yeah. So yeah, those are the things that I would really, or I rather wanted to highlight them in this episode. I think that, or I hope that it's of value to you, especially if you planning to get into this journey. It's for me again. It's very important for me to I advocate for investing in property for a whole lot of reasons rather. Um, I always also advocate for, if you're gonna commit into an investment like property, it's always good to start earlier. To start earlier, I mean studying early as possible as you can while you're still young, because it means as your earning potential or your income increases, you have time to, or more money to pump into the bond so that you can clear it out. The other thing is that you don't want to buy it too late, that you end up retiring, and when you retire, you still having to chase to pay off the bond entirely. And if you start earlier, the other benefit is that you can pay it off quicker and still be able to get a second bond while you still have the first one, or even be able to qualify for a larger amount, because in your first property you've been able to show the banks that actually you're not a high risk by, if over the time, committed to repayments on time, or even paying what more than what they would have wanted you to. So that is very, very, very important for me, and I think it's um it's really commendable. In the previous episode, I spoke about a friend of mine who committed to this, and I was so excited for him because he's way younger than me, like he's just below 30 years. And when he was doing this, I was like, shucks, I so wish that I had started earlier as he's doing, right? And also for him, also it was he spent a lot of time also in ensuring that he's ready for it. When he was renting, he looked for a very small place, but during that time, small place, the rental is not expensive. And during that period, I think he was saving. I've never asked, but I think he was saving a lot of money to help him, to when he's moving in, that he doesn't get to really feel the pinch of this commitment. So that's why I keep saying I commend the first time buyers who really commit when they're still young and there's time for them to explore the journey of investing in property. So yeah, it's really exciting. Um, and I really hope that in the next episode we can dive into other topics and expand in this. So thank you so much, guys, for joining me. Thank you so much. Bye.